Hello, everybody. Welcome to Layer 1 to 3 World Congress. For this particular session, it's a panel. We are going to explore 5G Catalyst, addressing multiple industry verticals. In other words, we're going to look at what 5G brings to the table when it comes to industry verticals. And to do that, we have a highly distinguished roster of speakers with two major leading service providers in the world, with Dawane of Verizon, Colin Bannon of BT Global. Then we also have one leading supplying vendor with Netcracker. It's an NEC company, and it's a big leading supplier in the OSS BSS domain. And we also have two consultants with Hema, Kadia, and Allan, Nurkan. So ladies and gentlemen, first, welcome to this panel. And if you can introduce yourself briefly and say a few words about how your work relates to 5G industry verticals. And I'll start with Dawane.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Excited about today's panel. My name is Dawane. I'm with Verizon, specifically our Verizon Partner Solutions Group. We work throughout our organization with partners across the globe on ways to leverage the various assets within Verizon to grow both our partners' top line revenue as well as ours in unique ways. So we're excited about what 5G brings to the table and the overall network transformation that's occurring across the global networks with our partners and ourselves.
Thank you, Dawane. Colin?
Thank you, Stephane. Hi, it's Colin Bannon. I'm the CTO of BT Global, a global service provider. And I'll be speaking about some of the investments that we've made both in our regional 5G network and also on our global multinational outsourcing business, and what 5G and some of the use cases that are coming on today's session.
Okay. Bob?
Sure, thank you. This is Bob Titus. I'm the CTO of Netcracker. The way we look at this is service providers must become multi-tenant solution providers of 5G capabilities to multiple industry verticals. Our role in that is enabling service providers. We think there's some critical capabilities around network automation and network orchestration, converged charging, digital marketplace, connectivity management. We think these are all critical capabilities in order to make the 5G promise a reality.
Thank you, Bob. Hema?
Hi, my name is Hema Kadia. I am the founder and CEO of TeckNexus. TeckNexus is exclusively focused on 5G and telecom vertical. We have done an extensive research on who are the key players in the 5G ecosystem, what are the different verticals, and what are the related use cases that has been launched or in trial, as well as where the 5G has been rolled out, and so on.
Thank you. And then we have Allan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Stephane. Pleased, happy, and very excited to be on this panel today and for the World Congress, Layer 1, 2, 3, 2020 in general. I work with primarily enterprises and some service providers with a host of things, advising on network topology, network strategy, investment advice, and global procurement solutions. Today, my interest in this panel would be talking more about 5G catalysts in society at large, the ecosystem, and what standards or lack of standards there is today.
Thank you, Allan. So let's get started then. If the audience watched my keynote session, I talked about Industry 4.0. And we're already getting there, even though it's the early days still of 5G, but 5G is taking off quicker than we have seen with every introduction of a new generation of mobile technology in the past. And the real driver will not be us human beings, but actually everything else. And that's going to transform the way we interact with our society. The world will be better. And, given the circumstances we are at the moment, it couldn't be an understatement. So I'd like to ask our service providers here, Dawane and Colin, to start first and share their experience of what they have been doing so far and have seen so far in their own environment.
I can start if you like. For us within Verizon, it starts with digital transformation. We're having conversations with our customers across the gamut in different sectors, different industries, and across the globe around 5G. And one of the things we always talk about is that if you're not looking to disrupt your business in a significant way, then you're most likely going to get disrupted. And that starts with looking at everything from your customer experiences to your business processes of how you do business more efficiently and effectively. So to your point, Stephane, around the changes in the dynamics, whether you're talking about devices, whether you're talking about the applications and the connectivity component to that, 5G fits into that as you look at ways to bring your business to this digital transformation. So whether you're looking at public or private 5G networks, efficiency with multi-access edge computing or mobile edge computing to facilitate that, it starts with the business and how you transform that business digitally, and the applications that are used for that business and the platforms in order to push that business forward. And then the network connectivity goes hand in hand with that. So from a 5G perspective, we're seeing everything from public and private 5G networks and leveraging that to get a greater latency to the applications that support the various businesses, as well as looking at ways to change the experiences that businesses and consumers have from a 5G perspective. So a lot of exciting things that are coming down the pipeline. And as we talked about the fourth industrial revolution, it starts with all of that rethinking of the way that businesses and consumers interact within this new paradigm.
Thank you, Dawane. And Colin?
Take myself off mute would be good. I think the CTOs normally have the most difficulty with mute, as I found. So Bob, watch out. So if I think about the BT story, for our consumer division, obviously 5G, the business case for us originally was to work around the use case for consumer and creating the very best network in the UK for 5G. And we've done that. The best for gaming, the best for latency, the best for coverage. We've rolled it out the fastest to the most cities with the best user experience by far compared to our peers. But it's more than that for the business world. And some of the use cases that we're talking about around this is, for one, if I think about picking one to start with, is the healthcare sector. Now, first of all, you need to understand we made an acquisition of EE, which is the one of the mobile providers, and brought it into the BT group a few years back. And as we were doing that, we signed a deal to replace all the emergency services networks. So all the blue lights in the UK, the fire, ambulance, police, etc., were on the older radio spectrum. And the guarantee, the universal service guarantee that we were working on was to provide 5G services and mobile services with its own slice for emergency services with really high availability throughout the whole UK. So we're already have a roadmap where we're executing on a plan to provide emergency services with its own level of quality of service, such that national disasters, 5G can be part of the bedrock for that. But where it's starting to get into outside of emergency services focus, drilling down into specific use cases, there's one that we're doing is around the healthcare, as I mentioned. And in University of Birmingham Hospital Foundation Trust, we're doing use case scenarios where 5G is doing remote telemetry of the emergency senior professor clinicians for emergency services are connected inside and working with the paramedics of the ambulances themselves, which is transforming the emergency critical clinical care. Because of course you can't have somebody who's gone for 18 years to university in every ambulance, who's the leading clinician, but they can dial in and connect in and be videoed in and be looking at all the telemetry, real-time telemetry, critical life-saving telemetry. And I can't think of a better use case where 5G is helping enable low latency, critical connections, critical quality, very high bandwidth telemetry and video to allow these doctors to make a difference to people's lives, real world, and hopefully save lives from that perspective. A couple of other ones that we're thinking about, or where we're actually executing and signing deals on, is of course manufacturing and transport, in particular ports. Ports seem to be quite a challenging area for infill for Wi-Fi often. There's lots of big chunks of metal, there's ships going by between ports if you're doing service on both sides of the harbor. Belfast Harbor is a huge, this is the place where they built the Titanic. It's a huge challenging port where we've wired up with 5G. And there's a ton of use cases around there, particularly around, one is just sheer connectivity for health and safety, for telemetry, but also, as Dawane spoke about, mobile edge computing, in-site with private 5G in its own small piece of spectrum, where they're managing a controller on site, being able to provide private 5G. And the use cases are starting to pay off straight away, where you've got needing less people to do certain jobs every day, where they go around and do inspections, where they've got the 5G connected augmented reality headsets in Belfast Harbor, and they're doing site inspections. The TCO is starting to pay in already. There's a number of harbor test beds that we're doing right now where we're trying this new technology and bringing new partners in. 5G, obviously, in the finally, I'll just pick one other one, is on the manufacturing side. On the factory floor, for this, we see generally the testing right now for connectivity and fidelity of high value transactions for CNC milling machines, where if you make it's real time feedback and control. These things are starting to become wireless. How do you make a change within fractions of seconds, sub-second response and controls of those CNC milling machines, where literally if you cut the wrong way or make an error on the tolerances, there's hundreds of thousands. One of our, albeit they're facing challenges right now, airline engine manufacturing customers, when they do a destructive engine test, the telemetry for that, you absolutely have to catch, because you're not going to be doing a test on an engine to destruction multiple times. You want to get that data, you want to get that telemetry right and get it right first time. So there's just a couple of the examples that in real world where these use cases are starting to find their feet. It's becoming less abstract, less theoretical, and people are starting to find real ways to bed in this technology and start to leverage it. That being said, for those who think, oh, Wi-Fi is dead, I don't think that's the case at all. I see hybrid environments, and our approach is now, I see hybrid environments for a long time in the future. I see things like building infill for 5G user experience still being really important as well, with a blended environment and the carpeted environments with Wi-Fi. And we think that taking a common approach to spectrum management across the lot in the in these buildings is probably the way to go forward. That we have a holistic approach. So anything that's doing broadcasting, whether it be Bluetooth, whether it be LoRa, whether it be private 5G, whether it be all the different macro stations outside, or whether it be the various functions of Wi-Fi in the building, taking a holistic approach when you do design and surveying is probably a good idea, and the approach that we're taking as we go forward to provide solutions for our corporate clients. And so that requires a bit of a culture and also a skill set, because the wireless guys have been over here and the Wi-Fi guys are over here, and they often use different terms for the same thing. You know, a lot of this stuff is still powered over Ethernet, and getting to it's a bit like networking and security right now that are converging as well. There's a set of common skill sets behind the scenes to roll out to these sites, whether it be project management, planning, spectrum surveys, design, cable room design, rollouts, that these disciplines need to sort of merge into one single set of skill sets that the future telecommunication specialists who will be doing this should be able to be conversant in all of these skills. So I think I'll leave that as it for me, and hand back to you. Hopefully that will give you an idea.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. You know, I like, you know, the segue into Wi-Fi, you know, and I don't know if you think about it, we're talking about 5G. In Wi-Fi, they're talking about Wi-Fi 6, right? So they're a little bit ahead of us, no? But anyway, so, and now let's go to Bob, because Bob is leading the way with Netcracker in helping service providers to monetize as much as they can in their business. So now 5G is coming in. So Bob, what's your story about you know, seeing all these new industry use cases coming, you know, into those billing platform?
Well, it's very interesting from our perspective, because each one of the use cases, and Colin described a bunch of them, each have different requirements. Yes. So as we look at that, it really starts with the ability to dynamically provision the network. So each of these requirements for different industry verticals will require different slice types. So you have to be able to provision those slices with the right quality of service, the right latency, and ensure that that's going to meet the needs of the business use case. Those slices might be permanent, they might be temporary. Maybe it's for a sporting event that's only going to last for 2 hours. Because of the dynamic nature of these use cases and these slices, you can't have manual processes to manage that. You need automation. So that's where we come in with the orchestration across all domains of the network to make sure that all different slice types can be provisioned dynamically for the different industry verticals to meet their particular needs, whether it's ultra low latency, whether it's access to applications, whether it's remote diagnostics, safety monitoring, whatever the use case is, control of drones, we need to be able to support that in real time and very dynamically. Also, those slices may shift over time. They may shift geographies, they may change dynamically. All of that is going to require full automation to enable those use cases. The other aspect, as you mentioned, is, you know, all of this can't be done for free. So each slice type might have different ways that, you know, may be charged for. Maybe you're charging for the latency, maybe you're charging for number of devices, maybe you're charging for application usage. So each slice might have a different way that it needs to be charged for. So your rating and converged charging needs to account for that. Some of it you may be billing on usage in real time. Others, it might be a fixed fee for the slice in a dedicated private mobile network. So all of that needs to be accounted for in your BSS platform and your OSS platform. And on top of that, you can't just provide the slice. A lot of the critical use cases we're seeing in these industries is all about the data and the analytics that you're gathering through the 5G network. So the number of devices getting connected, the amount of data then flowing through that network becomes critical to the industry vertical. They need to be able to capture that data. They need to be able to analyze it and leverage that data. That requires an open API capability, data management capabilities, and managing the behavior of those devices on the network, and providing that information back to the industry is another critical capability that service providers need to have in order to enable the true benefits of those use cases. So that's where we're focused in terms of serving multiple industry verticals, is providing the underlying foundational platform that's going to make all of those capabilities feasible, both for the service provider and for the industry vertical solutions.
Thank you, Bob. Now I'm going to go to the consultants, starting with Hema. Can you share your experience so far in dealing with industry verticals?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll also bring few use cases specifically from Industry 4.0 and 5G. So one of the key use cases that I would like to highlight is the 5G Encode project in UK. It's led by Zeta Networks, and it is focusing on three Industry 4.0 use cases. One is a real-time tracking of in-factory and in-transit time-sensitive assets. The second one, it is focusing on real-time monitoring and analytics for closed-loop manufacturing. And the third being AR/VR to support design, manufacturing, and training. The key issues that they were facing currently was, one is that they were having a wired connection, Ethernet cables, which had an issue with scalability to support massive number of sensors, which was required for the real-time tracking for the in-factory and in-transit assets. The second thing was for the AR/VR related use cases, there was a need for supporting ultra-low latency. So this was also not being met with the current connectivity options. And as an overall, what I'm seeing from an industry perspective, the two key benefits that every use case is currently focusing on is, one is improving the efficiency and the second is reducing cost. Like in this case, the Ethernet cable cost, which is a higher maintenance cost, is one of the key things. But overall, whether I look at this particular 5G Encode project, or if I bring in additional use cases, like if you take the Ericsson's factory in Estonia, where they are jointly working with Telia, again, they are leveraging 5G and AR assisted factory maintenance. But again, in the same case, though they are leveraging AR technology for troubleshooting, helping the technicians, the key part is how they can improve the efficiency. So in short, wherever I'm looking at currently across the industry, specifically in the manufacturing sector, the key things that we see is, one is how it can improve the efficiency, and to the point that Bob highlighted earlier, it's pretty much another way of looking at automation, where all you can bring in automation to bring in that efficiency and how you can have ways to to reduce the cost.
Thank you, Hema. And Allan?
Yeah, thank you, Stephane. Thank you very much, panelists. They're very, very interesting use cases and examples that were brought up. And for me, coming at this from a different, perhaps a slightly different angle, I think it's remarkable. First of all, the speed that 5G has been rolled out. I was on a panel last year discussing the same topic, and I said within the year. Last year I said within the year we'll see perhaps not completely pervasive 5G experiences being rolled out, but certainly a lot across the Western world as we know it. I was also asked about China, and China is ahead on many things when we look to 5G, and they've done a lot there. However, my point in this starting out with my saying I want to sidestep the question slightly is that 5G compared to 4G is the first time we've sort of seen industry lead with a rollout. So with 4G, it was a consumer product, 3G consumer product. Now 5G is stepping in and filling, albeit broad, but niche applications within industry. And I think we should be very careful not to miss an opportunity here. What I mean by that is I'm coming from a carrier background. I worked now on 20 years in the carrier business, carrier to carrier relationships. And in the carrier industry, I used to say, if you're an enterprise customer, nobody has a string long enough. So nobody can deliver an end-to-end solution on their own products across across continents, let alone countries. Maybe a few players can deliver end-to-end solutions on countries, but certainly not continents. The same, I think, is true within 5G. In order to have a pervasive 5G experience utilizing everything that 5G can be, not everyone has all pieces of the puzzle.
That's right.
So you need, in my mind, you need a few components to create what society at large thinks of as 5G. There's sensors, there's the transmission network, which is the 5G itself. You will have to have some sort of compute platform, and of course the content of the application. So those four elements are needed. What I start out by saying is we need to be a little bit careful not missing the opportunity, is that so far there are very few industry collaborations exploring this. I know a few in Finland, in Sweden. I know BT is doing a bit with some industry partners, trying to make a localized ecosystem. But more so, I think there's a real opportunity and space here for standards organizations to step in, as well as local and national governments. Back in the day, when the internet was developed, it was, in Europe at least, it was national entities working together. So the classic Deutsche Telecoms, the British Telecoms, the Tele Denmarks and the Telias of the world that agreed to create connectivity and work together. And that was driven by an interest more than anything else to begin with, but also a national interest. So sorry, a technological interest and a national interest. I think the same is true now. If you look at certainly metropolitan city areas, which could be enabled by 5G, so have pervasive AI experiences, pervasive automated automation, such as self-driving cars. There's a lot of applications here that we should be careful we're not missing. So I don't want to drill too much down into what the other panelists said, but I think there's an opportunity here for disruption and cooperation, more so than ever before.
Yeah, that's exactly what Dawane said, at the very beginning, from a Verizon perspective, you'd better look at how to disrupt your own industry. Otherwise, you might be disrupted. So what are the lessons learned so far, Dawane?
Yeah, I think from the lessons learned, and I'd appreciate all of the panelists kind of walking us through there, because it is really an exciting time. I think the lessons learned, where you talk about the importance of what we're building out and building these networks. The last point around standards and the ability to work together is something traditionally we as carriers and service providers and application providers have done. But one of the key factors in growing this out are three things: scale, interoperability, and the ability to manage and orchestrate across multiple networks and multiple clouds in an efficient, global, secure way. So all of those things come into play when you talk about lessons learned as to how do we build on what we've done from 4G and learn from it. How do we work as we have traditionally on interoperability across multiple platforms and across multiple networks in a real way. And then as we look to innovate, building through thought leadership, Verizon operates over 6 5G labs across the globe specifically around innovation. So the innovation comes in the form of these applications and these experiences that will come over these low latency networks that 5G builds out for us. It will be critical for us to not just have the traditional relationships that we've always had, but what are the new relationships that pertain to machine learning, IoT, robotics, artificial intelligence. When you talk about new use cases like guided vehicles and drones and for the delivery of services and autonomous vehicles, what do those relationships look like and what can we learn from each other in those partnerships? Colin mentioned manufacturing. That's one of the things from a manufacturing automation perspective that Verizon has really driven into and worked on and have some unique partnerships. But how do we build off the learnings that we have and innovating in that space and disrupting in that space to create, strong partnerships? And then, with the our partnership from a Verizon perspective with, I know it's called something different. We're on a global call, but American football, the NFL football, but we are in most of the NFL cities, NFL stadiums, but really those immersive experiences with alternate reality, virtual reality, shared experiences in real time is something that 5G can build on. And we're excited about what that brings from a 5G perspective, but it also gives us an opportunity to collaborate in a new and unique way in the entertainment space, in entertainment industries, and bring forward those technologies. So there's learning that we can get in order to build out the future that we're talking about. And then using all this, one of the things that we talk about within Verizon is kind of the DNA, which is it's the devices, it's the networks, and then it's the applications, as a couple of the panelists have spoken to. But all of those components play together. And part of that, once you have the devices deployed in the field with 5G enables really a significant proliferation of devices from the IoT perspective. 5G brings latency and huge bandwidth. And then these applications that run on top of this bring more visibility and more real-time discussions. But that also brings to bear data analytics. And what that brings to bear going forward. So there's a lot of exciting things. I think to your point, to your question, it comes down to the partnership, the interoperability, and then really building out new relationships and partnerships in these new spaces are the things that Verizon is learning as we kind of explore the new directions that 5G is taking us in.
Yeah, thank you, Dawane. And that's going to be a very interesting task moving forward, because as Bob described, talking about the different slices that are required to enable each particular use case, and you talk about partnerships, and I'm like, whoa, depending on how many verticals you are dealing with, you're gonna have to build relationships, in each of these verticals. So it's going to require a new team. I mean, you have to transform the entire team as well, because and you need to bring, or maybe not, to bring in people who have or who already have some knowledge of a particular use case. I mean, is it what you are trying to achieve as well, or you have to do, or you don't need to? How do you build those relationships each time? From what I'm hearing from different service providers in the world, actually, is that the good news, apparently, and you tell me if it's right, you don't have to go chase those use cases, because in many cases, what I see in the world is you have the industry coming to you, saying, hey, I've heard about that 5G. I heard that it can actually improve my life, the way of doing things I've been doing for so many years. Can you help me? As opposed to, chasing each use case. I mean, is it something you see? I mean, people knocking the door?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially from a business perspective. As I talked about disruption and digital transformation, that's the critical component, is that most businesses are looking to digitize and digitally transform. So, low latency applications is not something new, but the promise of 5G is what's new. So to your point, Stephane, they are coming to us more so than we are to understand how they can effectively transform their businesses in a real way. There's a stat that in 2025 that 75% of enterprise data will be at the edge, closer to the customers, closer to the consumers, and closer to the businesses. So bringing your business to that new reality, and how you incorporate things like MEC and things like 5G in order to bring that reality to the current day is things that businesses across the globe are interested in learning more about.
And Colin, what's your perspective on that, based on all the examples you gave, because I mean, talking to healthcare people is very different to talking to a factory, for example. But I mean, and these are just two verticals. There are plenty. I mean, you also mentioned ports, and you're right, because I don't know if you're aware, Nokia is actually running a big experiment in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. And this is a huge, as we all know, this is one of the biggest ports we have in Europe. So when you have to basically equip with connectivity and make things work, automate as many processes as possible in this port, you have, this is a big challenge because, in a port, the propagation laws of the waves are very different than, let's say, in a city. So you have a new challenge there of where to put, those cell sites and how to run operations when, you have tons of containers coming in, then it's being emptied. You have a different configuration. So the thing is, I mean, what is your experience so far in learning, having a team dealing with that particular vertical versus another one, and trying to address as much of those verticals as you can?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me start off by saying, in the spirit of bipartisan harmony with Dawane, I'll say football. I'll say actually soccer in the UK. We, a few years back, BT, you may or may not know, we got into
Yes.
As part of, as most carriers did quad play, it helps you be more sticky with your customers and reduces churn. And we became a media company, right? And it's quite a scary thing, because once you turn it on, it's 24/7. You're producing content, and it never turns off. It's just go, go, go. So you're constantly looking to innovate and create new user experience. And Dawane mentioned that, and tweaked my memory, is doing production for these big events. In the traditional way, it's quite an expensive thing. You have to push your production teams out to on-site,
yes,
right there at the stadiums. And there's multiple layers of production teams because of latency and because of the technology the way it was. And 5G is just one way to be able to pull that back and centralized, and have, as there's multiple games of soccer going on all over the country that we're broadcasting from, you can have a lot more efficient sort of center of excellence with smaller remote teams doing out there. And the other thing that Dawane mentioned about lighting up new ways of interaction, so that there's a feedback from the users to make it more interesting, that they can view and experience that game and control the experience on what cameras. So new things like ball cameras and overhead cams and seagull cams and all, the pub cam as well. All those things that the way you want to watch it, people will have more choice. Yes. And that will help differentiate and be more of a hook and be more compelling for customers to go with yourself. And that's really important for us to both transform and give our customers better experience and more choice. So that's the fun bit. So let's talk about the lessons learned then on that side. Well, first of all, fact check in our view is, the reality is in the corporate world, two things I'll talk about. One is edge compute, because the first thing I would say is, which edge are you talking about? Because there's about 5 edges that we're talking about with edge compute. And I think collectively as an industry, we need to be maybe a little more clear when we're talking about what use case. I'll talk about that in a second. The second thing is, is just what we're finding. And in manufacturing, each use case has different challenges. One is, some of it is spectrum. So where did we come from? Why did we do 5G? Well, to be completely honest, in the national carrier perspective, it was a consumer business case, and it wasn't necessarily low latency that drove it. And most carriers, that wouldn't have been what they said, because you have to understand, as you all do on the panel, but others may not, is that, you know, this is probably a 10-year standard. And there's drops of releases of functions that we all want that hasn't been released or agreed yet, that are still coming down the pipe. There's things that are released now that we are looking to, you know, dynamic spectrum sharing, all sorts of stuff that are coming up that's going to make it more efficient and cost effective and better for us to be able to do, between managing spectrum as we're winding down some of the old spectrum, and being able to manage between both and run all the systems all at the same time in an efficient way. But let's talk about the specifics of the fact check on that. Is, yes, there's a couple of cases right now out there that are low latency, but most applications right now have yet to be written to really take advantage or need that low latency. You know, if you think about, you know, people, none of us spoke about autonomic cars. That's because it's a bit like speech recognition 10 years ago. It kept on getting pushed out by a year. Yeah. So, you know, traffic light control, smart cities, that's going to take a while because of regulation, because of health and safety, because of a lot of human factors, not necessarily the technology. So that's not what's driving it right now for us. It was making massive amounts of bandwidth in the urban centers immediately, and a better user experience was the first and foremost business case why we, you know, rolled out to hundreds of cities, right? That was the speed. Behind that was improving user experience, but the apps. So if we think about the apps, if there is a low latency app right now, we most likely in the corporate stance will see them written, running on an edge compute device in the factory, right? Hanging off the private 5G rather than long lined, you know, so the minimizing, you know, sub 10 millisecond. However, there's also edge compute at the edge of our RAN. So in our metro nodes all through the country, we have cloud edge capability that we built, and that we're also sort of leveraging the same power that we're doing with our broadband caching content deep in the network, because you can imagine all this additional bandwidth requirement on our core network is, you know, astounding in terms of what this is turned on. And to be efficient about that, you want to push the content deep into the network, into these locations. Now, there's also compute there. We're using that compute for our virtual RAN and our MEC for ourselves, for our own use, but that lights up the capability that you've got edge compute now at the edge of the mobile network, not just at the edge of the branch site. So then there's all the conversations of, you know, Google Stadia, you know, gaming platforms. So the corporate ones we're finding are in the factories co-located, because they're spending so much money anyway on those sites that having some blades in there isn't such a bad thing if it's a building site. What we're seeing that will drive low latency for mass macro 5G networks first is probably gaming and augmented reality. So the conversations we're having with the games manufacturers, they'll be the first ones with the use cases of their platforms on those metro node edges across the country. But if you look at the UK, it's not that big a relative to the US or some of the other locations. You're only talking, you know, north to south, about 8 millisecond difference, you know, so it's not a huge amount. You also need to consider that the carrier neutral facilities are the other edge compute, and the cloud providers that have provided POPs in all those areas anyway, that if you have local breakout from the mobile networks in each of these regions, you're not talking about too many more hops and too much more latency, that you could be running those workloads right in the CNF or the local cloud data center. There's not that much So if you compare that across, there's not a huge amount from that perspective. In larger geographic footprints, obviously it makes more sense. And then it's a techno-economic on how many edge platforms you want to put across that footprint. But you're dealing with just physics and speed of light. So that's what I would say about that. So I think corporate businesses are still thinking about writing to take advantage of that in what we've seen from the market. There'll be the niche cases for the ultra low latency, but the modus of how they're dealing with that, as I said, is probably the edge compute in the branch or the factory floor. I think the next ones will be some of the transport telemetry, but once again, a lot of those telemetry things, until it becomes autonomic, the latency it can live with a few more hops back to those other edge platforms for now. Yeah, and that's what we're seeing today. Of course, this is really fast moving. 6 months, ask me again, I may say something different. I don't know about you, Dawane, that resonates with you at all, but that's just me speaking open with you.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Yeah, I agree.
It's fascinating because when you enumerate all the different use cases and all the challenges when it comes to enable those use cases, it's very different. It's a totally different world, you know, from the world we have been living in of providing a network, you know, connectivity, mobile broadband to us. So it's, you know, can we say it's pretty straightforward. You know, we have what now almost for some 3 decades of doing this, and now we're jumping into new uncharted territories of, hey, look, we have an NFL stadium, you know, to look at. On the other hand, oops, we have a factory. Then we have a city, you know, automating and controlling the traffic lights and making the city smaller with sensors, you know, to tell whoever is in the NOC, the network operating center, hey, there is a big crowd over there. Okay, so shift, you know, the coverage to that part of the city and shut down, you know, the other part of the city. And in fact, Verizon, when we had the Super Bowl in San Francisco here, that's what you guys did. And I can't remember what you used, what their drones, or there was something very interesting, you know, from, because there was the Super Bowl village where you have a huge crowd. And then when the crowd dissipated, you were able to reallocate the coverage and capacity. So there was no 5G. So you did it on LTE, actually, LTE Advanced. And that was working, you know, very well already. So now,
really quick,
yes,
just one thing to add about this that we haven't mentioned, and it's been interesting that Colin made me think of, is that we're probably about 45 minutes in, and we really haven't mentioned the pandemic and the impact that the pandemic has had. You know, we're not in person right now. We're on, you know, on a platform, a video conferencing platform. So even the pandemic is kind of, to Colin's point about how we're accelerating things, even that has changed the way that we interact, the way that we meet, and having bandwidth, having low latency, even in the pandemic, about how we've changed healthcare, to Colin's point about, you know, telemedicine, and interacting with your doctor, you know, over a video conference. So even you know, things are changing at an accelerated rate. And things, the environment, whether this pandemic or how we do business or how we interact, all of these things are factors in the way that we push technology forward.
Yeah, Bob, Allan, and Hema, can you add some color to the debate?
So I think there were several really good points raised by Dawane and Colin. One observation I have, and I'll just, you know, further Colin's comment on which edge are we talking about. What we've seen, and from our perspective, is the lines between the premise of the enterprise, the public cloud, the service provider, the IoT application provider, all of those lines are blurring. You know, there's no separation anymore between these organizations as you provide the end-to-end solution. So that raises a bunch of interesting points about the challenge of managing that and providing the industry vertical with the self-service and management capabilities they need, because they need to manage the service and data across multiple partners. And it's not always clear who's managing what and how that service is being provided because there are a lot of players. So to that point, you know, the ability to have partner management, to onboard partners quickly, to manage those partners, because, you know, back to the sports analogy, you can't just have one quarterback, you need an entire team providing the solution to the industry vertical. So from that perspective, you need to manage all of those players. Everyone needs to know their role, needs to know who's accountable to provide service level agreements and quality to the industry vertical. So that's a challenge that we have in terms of managing that partner ecosystem. It's something we're focused on helping people solve in terms of marketplaces and partner management capabilities. But as the edges and boundaries of these networks and capabilities continue to blur, I think the complexity is going to go up in the short term. And we really need to focus on that to manage that effectively, to give these industries the solutions they need. Because we need to react quickly, both to bring these services to the industries, but also to manage those services once they're in place. And more importantly, to allow each industry to manage the services they have themselves. So, you know, we're all here working remotely. Enterprises want to be able to manage their own services. You know, whether that's, you know, a localized 5G private network or the drones that they're using to run their business, those self-service capabilities become very, very important.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah, absolutely. So, and as we have been saying since the beginning, more use cases, more partnerships between different parties. And then thanks, we have the consultants, you know, to help smooth things out, right, Hema?
Yep. So I'll also highlight a few challenges that we have seen in adoption of 5G from industry vertical. One of the key challenges that when we talk to some of our customers is availability and cost of spectrum for enterprises to deploy 5G, specifically private 5G. The availability of devices supporting those specific spectrums is a challenge. The coexistence and interoperability, this is one of the points that Colin highlighted, between wired and wireless communications. And again, the key part that we've been always highlighting, even within the ICT industry perspective, is the interoperability. So one is a horizontal and vertical integration across ICT and OT technologies and applications. The other key part that I think everybody knows is the security part. It's now coming with the massive machine type communications, and specifically if you look from a public 5G perspective, that is going to be one of the key challenges when we look at wider adoption of 5G in the verticals, in the various verticals.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Allan?
Yeah, no, I think just picking up of what Hema was saying and a couple of the other guys, definitely security and is something I'm touching about a bit upon in my keynote as well. I think we're now coming to a point where we're seeing a lot of monolithic companies of the internet age are using and perhaps in some cases abusing all the personal data. And certainly from a public perspective, something different needs to be done when we're looking at sensors in a 5G network, because all of a sudden you'll have very granular and pervasive data on an individual if that can be used to a number of purposes that don't think are compliant or is not. I know it's not compliant with a lot of privacy laws today as they stand. So one thing I've been looking into a lot is the Solid initiative, headed up by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, which is it's more or less of a personal VPN or privacy VPN that shields you from sharing too much data. And I think these things have to be thought into the ecosystem in order for it to be palatable, certainly for governments but also privacy organizations out there. Another thing I'd like to touch upon is the one said about smart cities, and Colin as well, that we're not there yet. We're not there yet with self-driving cars or automated cities. But I think we certainly have all the components.
Yes.
If you break it down, they're right there. There's a lot of learning, a lot of implementation, but we have all the components today. And this is what I was talking about before with disruption. I think we need to think a little bit outside the box when we're addressing a 5G ecosystem. Looking at Tesla as a use case, they actively stopped or limited their autopilot that they've spent so much money and time on building. And after a few horrific accidents, which is understandable. But I think that shows that not one vendor can manage that problem of automated automotion. If you imagine a different example where the car actually is part of the smart city, where all the cars that have smart capabilities are part of the smart city, and you have a central governing compute platform that actually manages that entire spectrum of cars. That then becomes a different story. And these are things we can implement, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly within a couple of years if we get our ducks in a row.
Yeah, it's in, the self-driving cars example is interesting because 2 years ago, there was the big discussion, the big debate, the big buzz. And it looks like these days it's fading. Now, what I can tell, living in San Francisco, I'm still surrounded by plenty of robot cars. And particularly now that it has become a ghost town. So I don't know what they are trying to achieve because I think, it was better to actually test those cars as they did, started in 2017, 18, last year when the city was crowded. And because they were discovering very interesting problems. Like, if the car driven by a human doesn't really mark a full stop, the robot car was stuck, at the intersection. This is an example, and it drove people crazy because then you are piling up, a bunch of cars behind the robot car that cannot make the decision of crossing the intersection. I could write, an encyclopedia about all my observations of those robot cars. And as you said, Allan, in fact, I agree with you. It should be integrated as part of a smart city, with somebody who has control of these things. But the other problem is you have to remove the other cars. And, particularly, we say, here, the clunkers. But I mean, think about the budget because you need to give incentives to people to replace the car with a brand new one that has all the sensors. So you have some such disparities, between cars at this point, super equipped cars, with sensors everywhere. And then the next car has no sensor at all. It creates an insurance issue because, when you hit the bumper of a super equipped car, guess what? It costs thousands of dollars to replace the bumper. So, this is, this vertical is very interesting as many others because we already have, as Allan said, we have all the components. Yeah, we are, I can tell. I see them every day, actually, on the street. But how do we move forward and build a better cities and a better society? This is, the big challenge we have ahead of us. So, any comments on that? Anyone?
I will just add one point, Stephane. In fact, 2 weeks back in Phoenix, Waymo launched automated taxis. pretty much. So it's already like, to some extent, I don't know what would be the adoption rate, but it's been already launched.
Yeah. Anyone else? Because we are reaching, we're very close to the end of the session. And what I didn't say at the beginning of the session is there will not be any Q&A session. However, if you do have questions, you can still, drop me an email at stephane@lightcounting.com. And then I'll check with all the panelists. The other option is to activate your account on Swapcard and see how we can interact that way. Before closing the session, final word from everyone? Do we have anything to add that we didn't discuss or whatever?
Just wanted to thank you, Stephane, for moderating the panel. I think it's a topic area that's going to continue to change very quickly. And I think, as with most things these days with the pandemic, we're just all going to have to figure out how to react in real time
Yes.
To meet the needs of these industries going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are in a big learning curve. It's pretty steep. As we talked just before starting the session of managing all these events online, and wow, it has been. I'm still learning because I don't know all the features of Zoom. I mean, Zoom is just one platform. You have many others. Each time you jump from one platform to the other, and you discover a new feature because you need to do something that you don't know how to do. So, but anyway, well, thank you very much. Hema, Allan, Bob, Dawane, Colin, for your participations. It's fascinating to learn what you all guys are doing in this world of connectivity that is being brought by 5G. And it's even more interesting that we are just at the beginning and we already have a lot to say. So stay tuned for the next episode, maybe next year, Layer 1, 2, 3 World Congress in person. Let's see if that happens. According to the experts, maybe not. We're not out of the wood yet. But anyway, thank you very much for your attention and see you next year.
Thank you, Stephane.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.